Hello, it's Monday, June 5th, 2023. This is Dorian, they, them pronouns, and after having watched Across the Universe twice, excuse me, Saturday and Sunday, I had been meaning to watch Into the Spider-Verse again to catch up beforehand. I had seen Into the Spider-Verse when it came out. I believe I saw it twice in the theaters. To be honest, I don't think I ever watched it once it came out at home. Or if I did, maybe once a long time ago. So, unfortunately, I wish I had. I wish I had kept it fresh in memory. Hold on. Yeah, I wish I had kept it fresh in memory. But since I hadn't kept it fresh in memory, I have my own unique perspective of how I remember it and misremember it. Anyway, so I guess why I'm making this is, my last ranty make rant, did not nearly encapsulate what I wanted to say about Across the Spider-Verse. I was tired and everything, but maybe I would have left it at that or something, and I had I don't know if I was gonna make another video about it or not, but I thought, well, my plan for today was to watch Into the Spider-Verse, just to watch it, because I meant to watch it yesterday. What I meant to do was so anyway, this video will be about, a little bit about Into the Spider-Verse, or maybe all about Into the Spider-Verse, or circling back to About the Spider-Verse, or both, and the TLDR of it all is fantastic, amazing. It's kind of like, it's kind of like this Top Gun Maverick Top Gun effect that I had, where you see the sequel and then you see the original again and or for the first time, and then they both mend into each other so well that it tells a even fuller story together. So whatever I was saying last night, about that whole debate with Across the Spider-Verse of it feels inconclusive. Does it feel inconclusive? Da 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 da. Oh. What if you feel like Across the Spider-Verse feels inconclusive? Then immediately go and watch Into the Spider-Verse again after having seen Across the Spider-Verse. And at least for me, you watch it in a completely different way. And it is amazing. And I think I have a feeling of where they are going with this. And it's almost like I don't want to say, because if I'm right, then, I spoil it for everybody. But it doesn't matter if I'm wrong either, because it's just a concept, it's just an idea, and it's just a beautiful idea, and it's in the execution of that idea, and it is glorious, and what they've already done is glorious, and can we just agree that Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse are quite possibly the best movies of all time, or at least in terms of the best visual experience. I mean, I'm really high, metaphorically and literally, on the hype of having just watched it and being fresh with it. But there's just an incredible story that they're telling and how they're telling it visually. So I just needed to give my thoughts, again, having seen Into the Spider-Verse, afterward. And just rambly thoughts on that. Okay, so to get into that, it rhymes so beautifully. Both of the movies rhyme beautifully with each other. So, in Into the Spider-Verse, you don't open with Miles Morales. You open with Peter B. Parker, who is the framing device for the movie. I should probably get a glass of water. I will in a minute. The framing device for the movie, and he opens the story and closes the story, and then in the second movie, Gwen opens and Gwen closes the story. So then I might speculate that in the third movie, another iteration is going to start and close, and I have some theories, and and the gist of the story that they're trying to tell is that, and I haven't read all the comics, I haven't read all the things, and you would need like I jest, but you would need a PhD in spiderology to mythos to keep up with. There's so many things that I'm missing on levels that I'm missing. Like, for example, when I first here's a Easter egg. So spoilers, all the spoilers. I'm going to get water and then I'll be right back. Okay, so just for an example of something that I missed completely was, since I didn't see any of the Venom movies and had no interest in seeing any of the Venom movies, there was a reference that I missed completely in Across the Spider-Verse when Spot sticks his head through one of the holes and into another dimension. I presume each and every one of those is going to be a cameo reference, Easter egg. It's like an Easter egg scene that each one of those is going to be something that, I know I don't know this, but I know someone else will know this. Like the dot one, I don't know that reference, but I'm sure it's a reference. I'm sure somebody can be like, maybe that's from issue number 1 of Spider-Man, drawn by this artist. And, so I'm sure every single inch is something. And so one of the things, Spot sticks his head in, and then it is a live action clip with an Asian woman in what appears to be a convenience store, and I didn't know what that was from. It turns out that was from I saw in a YouTube video someone said that was from the Venom thing. So that lady is accustomed to, like, say, Venom coming into her shop. So this would be just another Tuesday for her, which is lovely. So anyway, focus, Dorian, focus. Try to focus. What do I want to say about Into the Spider-Verse right now, having rewatched it and seeing it in a completely different light, and where I think they're going with this, and how this is brilliant and beautiful, and already is brilliant and beautiful. And also, whether it's intentional or not, I am seeing it, and I am seeing it loud and clear, but I have a very heavy confirmation bias. So it might be subtle and just a nod in the background, but I actually think it might be the front and center focus of the films. But I can't be clear on this because of my confirmation bias, but I will just address it. I think that these movies are also a nod to the transgender identity. The colors of blue, white, and pink are prominent, and they are prominent in key emotional scenes, and they are across the board. There are some blink and you miss it transgender flags in Across the Universe that I actually didn't see either of them. I had to watch somebody else's video it was a combination of watching somebody else's YouTube video and, on my second rewatch that I picked it up, but I didn't catch them on my first watch. So to be clear, the only other YouTuber videos that I have watched so far, because I do kind of want to go in fairly blind, I watched E-Man movie reviews, spoiler-free Spider-Man review, and then after I saw the movie, then I watched Just My Opinion movie reviews of Across the Spider-Verse, and then I watched Nando Across the Spider-Verse. So I watched those 3, and that's it. So anything that if I reference is from one of those 3, that if I can't remember specifically, if I'm pulling ideas from, but anyway, so Yeah, in Across the Spider-Verse, I think there's a close-up of when, like, the camera is coming in through the window into Gwen's room, and you see, like, a pride flag on her dad's jacket uniform, like on above his badge or something, I think. And then there might be one like way in the back on the wall in the back, but I couldn't tell. Like, I would have to like freeze frame it at home or something. I don't know. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the broader issues of identity and also the use of the colors blue, white, and pink as a theme. So in Across the Spider-Verse, and as was pointed out to somebody on YouTube on the comments in one of those videos, because I didn't pick up on this, but apparently in Gwen's universe, in the art world of her universe, the shifting colors reflect her moods. So I'll have to watch this movie a third time with that in mind to look for that. But somebody was saying that, like, her hair turns blue when she's sad and pink when she's happy. And that would make a kind of sense and give an additional layer to some context of things. Because there's an early scene when Miles sees Gwen, and he says, you know, your hair looks pinker. Which, you know, we as the audience seeing things without context from Miles' perspective, we're thinking, you know, he's trying to find some small chat, trying to say something nice to say. He's kind of awkward. He doesn't want to say you look pretty or you look older or whatever. He's just trying to say something nice, you know. So he says that. But if this person on the comments was right, that is like a metaphor, then it could show that maybe since she came into the room and is seeing her friend, she's feeling happier and her hair is a little pinker. And again, in those key moments in the beginning of Across and the end of Across, when Gwen and her father are having those heart-to-heart moment conversations, the walls are flooded with the colors of blue and white and pink. And everyone is noticing how powerful that scene is. Now, when I watched Into the Spider-Verse, oh my god, the same thing. Subtler. But again, since I have my confirmation bias on, you know, I tried to do blue, pink, white, pink, blue, and everything. And this is just this. I was thinking to myself as I was starting the video and doing the setup, I'm like, what is this? This is like transgender cottagecore meets transgender middle-aged punk. I'm like, what is this? but it's an odd blend of down on my luck, me crashing, you know, at my mother's, and my mom is very country cottage core, but you know, now, you know, a recovering Christian, you know, transgender ally. She's coming around, you know, and then of course there's like, you know, old sort of kind of, you know, punk ass me of like cottage core is not my aesthetic at all, but I'm like, hey, it kind of works, I'll take it. But anyway, so back to present. So when I'm watching Into the Spider-Verse, when you get to that parallel scene, because like Top Gun Maverick with Top Gun and Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse, they layer on top of each other rhythmically, sort of with these key beat for beat mirror parallels of, you know, like at the beginning of this scene with, you know, Gwen appears from the perspective of her father, so if you put your perspective in the perspective of Mr. Stacy, he comes on the scene and he sees this person who's a mass vigilante who's ostensibly trying to save crimes but is not following the law, not paying the consequence of their decisions, is a vigilante and should be arrested and face justice. But up to this point was like, maybe small potatoes, like, this is Brooklyn, I got bigger fish to catch, you're just some, like, 2-bit, like, you catch some dime store robbers or something. Comes around the corner and sees, this vigilante standing over a dead body, and then walks up to that dead body, and that dead body is someone that they know personally and well, and then the conflict between, Spidey, the Spidey person and the cop, who is a relative, either like father or uncle, or of Spidey person, and then, the whole framing situation, like Tom Holland was getting framed in like, in the beginning of No Way Home, and then, the rest, it's all gloriously rhyming, and that's the whole point. But so you see the parallels between, you had Gwen and her father and that whole scene, and then into the Spider-Verse, it's with, Officer Morales and Miles, with the death of Prowler. And so then when you parallel back to the scene, the intergenerational scene of the conflict there, and you have that scene in Into, I guess I'll call them Across and Into, which are excellent titles, and Beyond makes even more. It all fits in my mind. Where was I? Well, I was thinking about, Into is introducing us into the multiverse, and then Across is, showing different multiverses, and then Beyond, they're nice words for the trilogy that they're going for. And, I think that, the first one is kind of, if it was in musical terms, the first one would be a solo, and then the second one would be a, duet, trio, quartet, chamber group, and then the last one is going to be Bill and Ted Face the Music, just everyone, But anyway, so the parallel scene, the intergenerational scene between, Spidey and Cop, then Into is Miles and his father, where Miles is behind the door and duct taped, and so can't respond to his father, and they're having that heart to heart. And if you look at the background in that scene with the dad on the left, it's subtle. It's not a glorious watercolor because we're still, photorealistic. We haven't broken into the collider thing yet. But there's bricks in there, and the top part of the brick is white, and the bottom part is pink with a white splash over there, so it could look like the white and the pink stripes. And then you get the other half of the screen as Miles's screen, which have the colors of blue, white, and pink in a more muted and diffuse way. And you see the echoing of those colors, again, mirroring those scenes. And of course it runs all throughout the Gwen Stacy character, but it is a very fitting theme to pick a theme for Spider-Man. If you were to pick a hero to represent transgender, my heart had been on Loki, and still is and can be, but I could see this being fitting for the story that they're telling with the multiverse and with superheroes of this. When you get back to the core root of one of the ideas of superhero movies, and one of the ideas of the heart of Spider-Man movies, back to the original Tobey Maguire and everything, is identity and balancing the identity of your private life and your personal life, and your school life and your work life, all of the above. And who better emblematic of that than I mean, you had it with Superman, and I don't know all the comics, but Clark Kent with the glasses on and off, but really, I think of all the superheroes, I think it's been said that Peter Parker and that Spider-Man, that's really essential of any of the characters of this dual identity of, by day, a student and or a starving artist and or a struggling journalist and or trying to make marriage work and or, trying to keep down the daily grind, essentially, just on the cusp, lower socioeconomic status, just on the cusp, trying to hold down the daily grind and balance that with being a superhero. And even just doing that with regular old day-to-day villains of the week would be hard enough. But now that it's like the fate of the world, and really how to still walk that line. Tony Stark doesn't have to walk that line because, he doesn't have to do the daily grind, and T'Challa, rest in power, was a king, and so on and so forth. But yeah, so if anything is about having all of these identities, and then for Miles Morales, and I obviously can't speak to the experience of being non-white at all, but for Miles Morales, I can't even begin to imagine all of the racism of like, well, you can't have a black Spider-Man, and you can't have a black Peter Parker, and you can't have a Latino, and you can't, I mean, for fuck's sake, I think there was actually, or is actually, some kind of law that says that Miles Morales can't appear in a solo film if Peter Parker isn't present. And I'm like, what? Why? Because they think a non-white character can't carry that it still has to be, a cis-het white male lead, and so there's that always, and just tackling that idea of racism, that topic of racism constantly of, well, you are not fit to be a superhero, and this ever-present theme of gatekeeping, of somebody else is trying to decide what you can and can't be and who you can and cannot be, and so on and so forth. Like, well, your superheroes have to be tall, or they have to be male, or they have to be white, or they have to, have 4 working limbs, or they have to be, binary, or they have to be straight, and so on and so forth. Oh, and these movies are attempting to blow that out of the water. They're not just hinting at it. Like with the MCU, with Loki, if you happen to watch it and dig deep and watch a TV show on a Disney Plus and you got into episode 6 and you were watching, and for 1 minute, Loki says that, he doesn't even spell it out. He just says a bit of both, and that's it. And then appears to have a cis-hetero relationship, and so on and so forth. So, it's not openly acknowledged, really, that... Anyway, spinning off tangent. Or like with Captain America and passing the torch to Sam Wilson, and how that torch passing is being handled. That's a side issue. But I think that Across the Spider-Verse is really trying to show all diversity, and you could really see that in Across with like just the body type diversity and representation, and trying to show that there's a wide breadth of people who could wear the mask. But even so, they were still saying that it was Peter Parker. So again, in the first movie, what they're saying is that, a couple of the characters thought they were the only one, they were the only Spidey, and then in the second one, in the society of Spideys, there's a lot of different ones, but they all seem to be variants of Peter Parker. So there's Penny Parker, and there's, Peter Porker, and there's Peter Parked Car, and so on and so on. With the exception of Gwen Stacy, right? Putting a pin in that. And also maybe Jessica Drew, putting a pin in that. But a lot of the Peter B. Parker, they're all Peters, right? And one of the big points of, so one of the things of Into was, hey, Miles Morales, you can't be Spider-Man. There's only one Spider-Man. Oh, hey, is this a test? Oh, hey, you made it. You can be Spider-Man. And then, the sequel is expounding on that theme, but more so to the point of, hey, can you be, you were bitten by a spider. You're Spider-Man, right? But now it's saying, no, that's not your destiny. That's not your destiny at all. And it's playing with those themes of, do we determine our own fate or not, like the Loki show does. And, and so, and so then it's, so then in Across, they're all saying, well, Miles, you specifically are the anomaly, because you're not a Peter Parker, you're Miles Morales, and you can't be Spider-Man. And then it ends with him saying, like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. And then, cliffhanger. So I think what it's saying is that someone who is not a Peter Parker can still be a spider person. But the other thing is, you also have to think about the villains too, and so putting a pin in that too, a lot of pins, pin cushion of a brain, is that with the villains, especially with Spider-Man, and this was something that No Way Home really did quite well, and you could see it in a lot of the earlier Spider-Man stories. Stretching my legs, sorry. And I think it is also maybe a key part of the Spider-Man stories, except that I still can't bring myself to see, like, the Sony villain movies like Venom and stuff. I'm just not. But I do want to talk a little bit about the Spider-Man, some of the Spider-Man villains, at least in the stuff that I've seen. So when you see the Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, No Way Home, and Across and Into movies, so those are the ones I'm going to talk about and nothing else, because I don't know much else. Most of the villains are very, very, very sympathetic people, are like you and I, but for the roll of the dice, right? And unlike a lot of other, I think, superhero villains who are very more evilly, like Gore the God Butcher, But no, the Spider-Man, since Spider-Man himself is a kid, and your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, I think a lot of the villains are low-key, and they're relatable, and it almost to me could take like a My Little Pony route, where you really, but for the roll of the dice, they could be your best friend and on your team too, because a lot of them, except for Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, I think most of them are perfectly good guys. Perfectly good guys, but by the grace of the gods, right? You happen to fall in a vat of sliming eels, and it gave you superpowers. I happen to fall in that same vat of slimy eels, and y'all hate me, and I didn't do anything wrong. This just happened to happen to me. And you could see kind of the parallels, or at least because that's the way my experience has been with, like, the transgender experience of, like, you know who you are, and you are the best judge of who you are and what your own identity is. And your identity should not be gatekept by anyone, save yourself. No one else should say, well, you can't do this because you're a woman. You can't do this because you're a man. You can't do this because you're black. You can't do this because you're disabled. You can't, etc., 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 etc. No one should be able to put any kind of defining limits on you, and you yourself are your own best determination of your identity. So, putting a pin in that. So it's about, so these are identity stories, like how a lot of people layer onto X-Men the stories of like being an outcast. But like, okay, I was talking about the villains. So like, you happened to have had something happen to your body physically that's beyond your control, that affects how other people treat you. But if society were kinder and we had more of a like Zootopia type situation or whatever, then maybe things would have been different. Like if you watch, and I think a lot of people will agree that if you watch the scene with Spot again, he just needed love and kindness. He's talking about discrimination. He's like, I can't show my face to people, like, haha, it's funny. But, like, he'll never show his face again. They got some good ones in there. But, I mean, like, and he just looked like Rorschach to me, Rorschach's my favorite superhero. So I have a soft spot for Spot. But he's like, look, man, like, no, I can't see my family. I can't be around anybody. I'm being shut out of everywhere. I can't get a job. No one will hire me because I look like this. I'm so destitute that I'm resorting to try to steal from ATM machines. I say too, because I got nowhere to go. And he's really, really down on his last luck. And if you look at it, like, Miles did nothing wrong. Miles didn't do anything wrong. And even going back on the rewatch, I don't believe that Miles did anything wrong. What happened to Miles is that Miles got Simba'd. Miles was an innocent bystander of an unfortunate incident, and then someone malicious in power, I never understand how this word is used correctly, but gaslit him into believing it was his fault because they are reacting out of a place of hurt and anger and pain, and they are projecting blame onto someone innocent too. Scar was doing it to drive away Simba for, Game of Thrones, but like, Spot was doing it because Spot would rather blame a scapegoat than something else, and we wouldn't have a story. So, so anyway, so you feel like if you just had a little bit of compassion. So, and again, I think E-Man or, one of those three people pointed out, or or Just My Opinion Reviews, or Nando, that Miles's problem was that his hubris and his callousness, or Spider-Man's. Yeah, back to whether or not it was Miles's fault that all this stuff happened. Like, no, I very much am of the opinion this is kind of one of those situations of, if something goes wrong, don't blame the fly in the ointment. Blame the person who didn't clean out the machine or inspect the machine, or blame the person who built the machine. So if I was Spot, 100% of the blame would go to Kingpin for building the fucking thing. You don't blame the innocent bystander who happened to get caught up in the whole mess. You blame the person who built the machine. In all instances, but Spot was an employee of Kingpin, worked for Kingpin, probably drank the Kool-Aid, and it probably projecting like one of those things of like, instead, I like to way overthink these things, so, but instead of, having inner self-reflection of like, hey, I'm a bad guy, I'm on the wrong side, I'm working for a bad guy, I should quit my job, instead of blaming himself and his life choices, projects outward onto a scapegoat to make himself feel better. But then it really doesn't help. There are these key moments, kick a man when he's down, of that Miles just happened to be there, like where maybe Spot was really down on his last dime, and this person who happened to be there, who he could map onto, like the one person that he sees, this is the one person he can see and talk to, so he maps on to that person. And then that person doesn't give him the time of day, is distracted, is taking calls, which mirrors the first movie where he's talking on the phone with his dad, and they're talking like this instead of texting, which shows me just how much time has changed in our culture between the two movies. I'm just stretching out my legs a bit. I was having empathy for Spot. So yeah, if that scene could have gone completely differently, if we're imagining all the universes, there could be a universe where Miles goes in there and just has some empathy and says, "Hey man, I can empathize. You know what? You don't have to be stealing stuff. We can help you." Like in No Way Home, where the whole point of the movie was, let's don't fight the villains. Let's actually see what they need and let's actually help them. Okay, so putting a pin in that, I need to try to focus and be like, where did I want to fully go with this ranty rant that I was on? Because I've put a lot of pins in a lot of things. But I think it's brilliant that the story that they're trying to tell, and where I think that they're going with it, is, at least for me, and maybe it's wishful thinking, because I've said this before, like I said, this was one of the things I wanted to see when the Star Wars sequels came out, and then they kind of did it, but they kind of didn't, but they kind of did, but they kind of didn't, was I didn't like this idea of, like, the only people who get to be special, it's a heredity thing. So, like, the beautiful thing about the very first Star Wars, the reason people loved it so much was that some nobody, some farmer, some guy, like, I'm 18, I'm out in Iowa, I'm some nobody, I'm some farmer, and I get to save the universe. It's great, fantastic escapism. But then, it does turn out, because archetypes and tropes, and, we're following these great archetypal mythos, of, like, well, he's the chosen one, right? And then they leaned really, really heavily into that kind of thing, especially in the prequels and stuff, with the midichlorians, which I know was Lucas's real original idea and stuff. But again, examine what you're actually saying, right? Because if you're saying that Luke gets to have powers because he literally has the blood of, through blood. So it's inherited, but it's also inherited by bloodline, so it's kind of like this, anti-adoption kind of, archaic shit. And then the midichlorian thing just doubles down on that too, as if saying that some people have better or worse biology than others. Of like, well, you should be better. You are better at the Force than me because your gut bacteria happens to be better than my gut bacteria. And then therefore you get to have magic and I don't. And so it would have been really great, because the spear, even though that's what they were kind of saying, the reason I think that we love the first 3 Star Wars movies is because they still have that egalitarian feel, through Luke and through Yoda saying the Force is everywhere. And so what I was really hoping to see for the Disney sequels was for them to finally rip that Band-Aid off and say that anybody, anywhere, whoever you are, anybody can use the Force anywhere. That's what I was hoping to see, and I got that hint with the first movie with Rey, because my personal headcanon was that Rey was nobody from nowhere, not related to not nobody, not know how, and she was just so great. And that would have been spectacular, because it wouldn't be about what you were born with or who you were born from or anything. And it's that story we like to see of, like, I don't want to say Little Orphan Annie because she had patronage, but you know what I mean? We like to see the story of the underdog. We don't really want to see a lot of stories about, like, what was that movie? Johnny Paycheck. Blank check. We don't want to see, But anyway, so, and then they hinted at the end, with the little kids reaching out and stuff, that the Force could be in anybody, and that, anyone anywhere could use the Force. But then we all know how it ended with, no, she's related to the most powerful person, and it is all heritage and blah, blah, blah. Whatever. And I don't know any more of the canon or whatever to know where it goes from there. But the point is, and especially with all of these superhero stories and, a lot of the source material, which is obviously fantastic source material, but a lot of it was written a long time ago, and, it's time for, newer faces and newer ideas and more modern ideas that are coming into the stories. But, trying to get rid of some of these really ancient archetypes of, that it comes down to, your genetics and, your body type and, your inheritance and all that stuff. And trying to undo, that can of worms. And, there can only be one Spider-Man kind of thing. So when you look at the world of superheroes, with the MCU and stuff, or in general, it's how does one become a superhero, right? I feel like growing up, there were a lot of things where, anybody could be a superhero. With the X-Men, a lot of people were born into it. But again, whether or not you got accepted or shunned kind of depended on what you were born with. And then when you had, the Tobey Maguire, superhero thing, I think it kind of, is an analogy for puberty, and it was a lot of, freak accident stuff and, physical transformation, and, I saw that with, one of my favorite shows, Alex Mack, where, you just fall into a radioactive pile of waste, and then you get powers or something, and I like the creativity of, the powers themselves aren't inherently good or bad. It's just your cleverness of how you use your powers, which is what you see with, Tobey Maguire and, what you see with, maybe Alex Mack or, it's not oh, you fall into this thing and this is the evil juice and this is the good juice. No, it's you fall into this thing and this thing, it makes you turn into a puddle. You can use that however you want. You can use that for good. You can use that for bad. You can use that to blow off steam. You can use that to just, pull pranks all day. You could Deadpool. You could do whatever. But there is no such thing as evil juice or good juice or whatever. Anyway. So sympathy for the villains. One chapter of my brain, sympathy for the villains. But anyway, so when you get back to Spiderology, it is still somewhat trying to gatekeep by saying only certain people can be superheroes. So the next chapter of my brain is going to be who gets to be a superhero? And what does that mean? And is that rocket ship going to break through the proverbial and metaphorical glass ceiling? Because I don't think we saw it hit yet. I think it was just skyrocketing towards the end of the... So who gets to be a superhero? So broadly, you could have a freak accident happen to you. That's a category of a thing. You could happen to be born really, really, really smart, but you didn't have any financial resources given to you, but you just through your sheer pluckiness, which I think is kind of maybe Spider-Man, Peter Parker, happened to be, you're born really smart, then you could be born smart and given a lot of privilege like Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne, or you could be born with a lot of privilege like T'Challa, but that you don't have any inherent powers whatsoever, but that you earn through that one is a different concept too, of you have an herb that can grant you powers, and and I suppose anybody could just eat the herb, but having built a whole culture and philosophy around how we decide who, so that's an interesting concept too, of like, we know what can turn people into this, but it's a limited resource, and so we're going to create a society that determines how we can distribute that. So that's a clever concept. Then there's, you get injected by, there's like the scientific testing, like metaphor, and the just because we can, should we thing. And then there's being traumatized into your powers violently, like Black Widow, like a lot of the women, but like Hulk and like Black Widow, and like being like blown apart, and like Deadpool and stuff. So anyway, there's a lot of ways to get, the point is there's a lot of ways to get powers, but it does heavily seem to imply in a lot of the movies that, there's superheroes, and then there's the rest of us. And we all know this, we kind of collectively know this as a society, and, that's sort of the appeal of the superhero thing, because if you say, well, everyone's a superhero, if everyone's a superhero, then no one's a superhero, but here's the thing, if everyone's a superhero, so what? Then you're just living in a great, awesome fantasy world where everyone is awesome, because guess what? Everyone is awesome. So that's where I think where they're going to go with this, but that I've been sort of getting ahead of myself, is first, they have to establish that Miles Morales can be a spider person, and we have to root for him, that he can't just be given to it. He has to come into it. But then they have to say that you don't just have to be Peter Parker to be a spider person. But even so, let's look, even though we have bazillions of spidery folk, all of them are Peter Parkers, but not all of them, because there's Miles Morales, there's Jess Drew, there's Miguel O'Hara, there's Hobie, there, so it's like I would keep an eye on the ones where their names aren't directly a variation that look like they could be a Peter Parker variant. I'd keep my eye on those. But also like Gwen Stacy as a focus. So what I think they might be heading towards in the third movie is basically saying, and this would, I don't know if they could or not, because I don't know what the comics do, and they're probably just following, people who read the comics would know, and I don't know if the comics would do this, but basically say, we're not going to gatekeep anything. Anyone can be a superhero. Anyone can be bit by a spider. Like, anybody can. And that literally everybody is awesome, and that no one is a side character. And that's what I'm hoping that they're going with. Oh, you thought that person was a background character? No, they're cool too. Like, and again, like, My Little Ponies kind of did this too with their Slice of Life episode, where, because, we realized the background characters are just as interesting. So when I was watching Into, I was getting really interested in, like, comparing and contrasting, like, Genki and Ned Leeds. And I want, like, is there anybody else out there that wants, like, a Ned Leeds, like, focused story? That, like, all the variants of, like, Ned Leeds, and, like, maybe, like, there's a version of Ned Leeds with, like, the Sorcerer Supreme, like, powers that, like, is, like, having an adventure with Genki or something, because Genki could be the variant of Ned, who is the version of Ned who doesn't want to be the guy in the chair. Or, since Genki is called Genki and not Ned, Genki could actually be just some other friend, and in this universe, because it's like Miles and not Peter Parker, Miles doesn't meet Ned, and this is Genki, and so it was an in-joke saying, like, hey, I'm not the guy in the chair, I'm not Ned, but, like, I am totally down for, like, finding out about Genki's backstory and Ned's backstory. So, okay, about 50 minutes into my ranty rant, and I was like, where did I want to go with this? Well, I said where I wanted to go with this is I think that they're going to say that everybody is awesome. There's so much more that I saw. Sorry, my knees are just... I'm trying to sit cross-legged because that's the best way to do this, but my knees can't really take doing that, so I'm going to be, like, in this weird... I'll try to sit in, like, a weird sort of odd side position or something. I don't know. Okay. I just got to stretch them. So, okay, anyway. So, alright. So, a few things that I noticed. Okay, so I guess I said where I think this is all going to end up. And then I want to give some shout-outs to some particular characters that I hope that they're going to highlight and where I think they're all going with this and some of my theories. So I guess I'm just going to go into wild speculation theory mode of where I think that they're going with this that I think will be really fun. Or just stuff I picked up on watching again. But anything, just phenomenal stuff. Just the more I think about it, the more there is to think about it. And I love to philosophize. So, okay, so I want someone more clever. I was going to say cleverer, and I don't know if that's a word, so that proves my point. More clever than me to do an analysis of Gwen Stacy's hair. It can be done because I saw a YouTube video of someone who made a whole video that was very supremely excellent on Tom Hiddleston Loki's hair and the state of his hair and the metaphor of his hair, and it was indeed glorious. I want a dissertation on Gwen Stacy's hair because it is the key to my whole the explanation of the universe. Just kidding, not kidding, kidding, not kidding. Okay. I need a timeline of events. We can be misled by the, what do they call it, the misleading narrator, right? How reliable of a narrator is Gwen Stacy? So, I have a whole new interpretation now, like knowing what I know now. And when you begin to watch Across, it opens with Gwen Stacy saying, "You think you know the story, you don't. Gwen Stacy knows more than we do, and she hasn't told us the whole story yet." And then another part of Across is, "I thought I knew the story. I don't," and so on and so forth. Let's start again. And also someone pointed out too, by the way, on the comments of one of those videos of like, in classic comic book style, the last page of the comic is a major cliffhanger, so it is the most comic book movie of comic book movies. Moving forward, so Gwen Stacy as a potentially unreliable narrator, or rather, she is a reliable narrator. Watch Into the Universe again from the perspective of Gwen Stacy. And I want a timeline of events based on the length of her hair. And that is a clue to what is going on behind the scenes that we can't tell because we're from the perspective of Miles Morales, okay? There's fishiness is going on, okay? So here's what I think, and I haven't really, I haven't figured it out, but I'm going to try to talk myself through what I think is a timeline of events. And I'm sure everybody's already figured this out already. I don't know. But okay, so when we first start into Gwen Stacy is, I'm gonna say, I don't know, for dates, I need ages, I need times. So what I do know is that in Across, they say that Miles is 15, and I wish I knew how much time, because they say it a couple times, elapsed from where Across starts to when Into began. I think that it might be like a year, give or take. I think that in Across he's a sophomore, he's 15. So, but I'm not quite sure how old he is in Into. But this is kind of important timeline of events. So, okay, Miles starts up at this new school. He comes into the classroom and he sits down, and ostensibly someone his age. So I'm going to say that Into, the start of Into No. It doesn't work. My brain is hurting. Because I was going to say a year, but that doesn't work either. My poor brain. I'm going to say a year for now. Because it's either a year or 2 days. My brain. Okay, so I'm going to say it's a year. I'm going to say that Miles starts the school and he's 14 and Gwen is also 14 and they are the same age and you know, whatever, and she's got hair to here and she sits down in a class next to him. And you will note that when you watch into the Spider 42, so the meaning of the universe is 42, but the meaning of the universe is also bagels. So or maybe bagels represent a chaos, or anyway, multiverse. So that was so infinitely clever of the Spider team. So anyway, the bagel thing, oh my god, like, that was an accident, right? That was just a glorious fucking accident. Like, that was an accident, right? I think that was just so good that they happened to have had a bagel in their movie. Wow. So anyway, 42 bagels and 42. Also, neither here nor there, I want to get a shirt that says, what up, danger? But with the trans flag colors. That'd be so great. So anyway, okay, so Miles sits down, Gwen Stacy's there, her hair's about to here, and when the spider, the 42 spider, is doing the glitchy thing, you know, when I watched the movie to begin with, I had no clue what that meant, and I thought that just meant, yeah, it's the radioactive spider. I didn't realize that meant dimensional stuff. And it is explained later in that movie because you see all the other characters doing the glitchies. So, okay, then retroactively in that movie you realize, yeah, it's glitching. But I don't know if it's spelled out that the spider's from another dimension. I don't think it is. But we now know that now. So the spider was brought from another dimension, and the spider did not have a watch or a wristband on it, and so was glitching, and that's why it was doing the glitchies. You know, and then it bites Miles, and then it dies, and then you know, Miles goes and sits down in class, and then Gwen is there with hair down to here. I want to know when Gwen joined the gang whose mission was to find anomalies and stop them so that universes don't destroy. So that universes don't get destroyed. Somebody, again, in one of those 3 videos that I mentioned, had the brilliant analogy that, like, what Miguel O'Hara is doing is the opposite of the TVA, which is beautiful. Like, the point of the TVA was to destroy countless lives, of saying, like, these variants are allowed to exist, but all of these variants and their societies and their worlds are not allowed to exist, and we are purging them. And so the Spideys, as our heroes, are doing the literal opposite of that, of saying all these people from all these dimensions have a right to exist and be and live. And so they're saying, you're not gonna erase us in the epic battle between like the Kang and TVA and Spider-Man and everything. Kang and Spider-Man, that would have been an idea. But of trying to save these people and saying we do have a right to exist, which one of the Kangs would appreciate. I think all the other Kangs would appreciate, because they're like, I want all of the universes to exist, because if everything exists, then I get to exist. So actually, our new Kang would be down for that. So anyway, so they're trying to save everybody, and so I want to know exactly the timeline of events. Exactly. Because here's the thing. What if Gwen was doing that the entire time? there are a couple of problems with my theory, though, because of her hair. But, like, what if she was doing that the whole time? Unreliable narrator, right? Kind of. What if she, in her universe, in her universe, the spider happened to bite her. So someone might have said, well, you're the anomaly, you're a woman and you can't be, you can't be it. Peter Parker is supposed to be it. And she didn't know anyone else like her or whatever until she met Jessica Drew, which blew her mind. And, so she gets bit by the spider, and then in that universe, Peter Parker drinks the lizard serum, presumably instead of the lizard man. And then he accidentally gets killed, and, Gwen gets Simba'd and that whole thing. And then she gets all mopey and depressed, and then we don't know how, but at some point she gets sucked through a portal. So what we're led to believe of original timeline of events of Watching Into only is that Kingpin is really the big bad who made the monster machine in the first place and stuff. And bad things happened as the spider folk were trying to intervene, but obviously the fault lies with Kingpin. So we think that because of that thing that happened, a bunch of, spots appeared everywhere and sucked a few people in, our band from Into, and sucked them in and then just poofed them into Miles's universe and stuff. And then the events of that movie happen, and then at the end of the movie, our whole entire team get shunted back to their universes, and everybody goes back to where they came from, and then in Gwen's life, so she then ostensibly comes back to her world and just hangs out in her world where she's lonely, and this is where a year passes in time, or, some amount of time passes, X amount of time passes, and then, she is going about doing her Spidey stuff, and the dimensional rift has already occurred, and she's doing her villain of the week thing, and then then she sees the Spidey team, and then goes off to Spidey Q headquarters, where she is now made aware of the awareness of she's not the only one. And then, presumably, the order is, there's a downside to this job. I'm going to send you out to jobs, not unlike Loki with the TVA. I'm going to send you out to jobs you have to nip the invasive species in the bud. An invasive species is popping up here, there, and everywhere, and you got to go nip it in the bud, because if you let it live, then it'll wipe out that entire thing. So you got to go nip invasive species. By the way, one of the invasive species is your buddy Miles over there. Go get him. And we're led to believe, coming into across the universe, that she is told about this assignment later. Hey, he's grown up now. It's a year later. Go get him. She comes into that universe to go get them. And then her goal is to try to... Because the radioactive, spider is dead, which was the first anomaly leak. And then Miles, her goal, maybe she is sent there to stop him, and or the other reasons, trying to obviously keep track of Spot as well. But anyway, I don't know if her goal, like Terminator, is like, I am from the future, I am to eliminate you, or I know more than you do, I am here to eliminate you. But again, since she's his friend, and since she's falling for him, I'm trying to do both. She's trying to save his life, and she is trying to pull the Back to the Future thing and the Star Trek Gate of Forever, City on the Edge of Tomorrow thing. She's trying to pull that of like, I know what's going to happen if, that whole story that is a quintessential part of what it means to be Spidey is, do you choose the one or the all? And she's like, I know Miles looks at this scene and sees a bus about to fall on a man and a child and is like, I can't stand by and let that happen. I'm going to go save this man. I don't care who he is. I don't care if destiny says I have to do it or not. If I see that he's going to die, I'm going to go save him. And then, of course, Gwen, because every Spidey has to make this dilemma of, do you grab this kid hanging off the bridge or this kid hanging off the bridge? And, I can do both. I'm trying to do both because when she sees that scenario, she's like, if he saves that man, this entire world will die. And so she's trying to do both. And it's heart-wrenching, and it's a hard ethical dilemma for her. And we, the audience, don't have resolution on that. We don't, because the POV is with Gwen and is with Miles. So they're trying, and they left us a little... They didn't want to leave us thinking, well, all of Paviters and Mumbattan, that entire universe is just gone now. They gave us a tiny bit of hope of like, we're trying, but we don't always succeed. So you're left with that dark realization that because the sergeant was saved, that they're all dead. He's dead, girlfriend's dead, they're all dead. Pavitar, no, we saw Pavitar escaped to HQ, but they're all dead now. So that ethical decision. Oh God. So where was I going with all this? So anyway, I lost track of my brain. So Gwen Stacy. So what is her timeline and when did she know? And so I think that I laid out what I think is we're supposed to think. I've got to stretch my legs again. Hold on. Okay. So I think I was trying to say that, that's the timeline that we're supposed to believe for Gwen Stacy. But what I want to know is, when did she know what she knew? And her hair gives us a clue. So I think that her hair supports that theory that is a straightforward telling of events, because first she has hair to here, and then because of Miles, his hand gets stuck there and the hair has to be cut off, and then so she gets a new haircut, and it, first it's like more chunky, shorn, like that just happened, and then you can see the progression of it growing a little bit in that movie, and then there's a cutaway, and then you see her again, and when you see her again, her haircut is noticeably different, so you can tell that some passage of time has happened, and she's cleaned up the cut a little bit, but it's cleaner, but it's still fairly short-ish, like to there-ish. And then, in Across, she has every single hairstyle under the moon, and there's a montage of it, which I think is a clue as well. But for the majority of the movie, you can tell that, if Miles definitely looks like, 1 year passage of time, I could buy her having about 1 year passage of time, because now it's, quite a bit longer, and she can pull it up and do a little ponytail. And so I do think that that's like at least 6 months of hair growth or something to that effect. A year, I could buy it. And so I think that her hair tells kind of a straightforward story that supports that timeline of events. But it occurred to me that there's more to the story, obviously. So one thought that occurred to me is that maybe, although it goes against the hair thing, but maybe she knew in the beginning. Maybe she always knew, because maybe she was telling the truth, from a certain point of view. maybe omitting certain details of when certain events happened, but maybe she was, bamfed, but she wasn't bamfed directly to Miles first. Maybe she was bamfed, maybe those other events occurred, and maybe she joined the gang, joined the band, joined, all the other Spideys, and her assignment was to go back in time to Miles from a year ago, to go back in time from Miles from a year ago undercover to try to erase where this all came from, right? Because they, Miguel O'Hara tried to stop, Miles from existence, but what if they could go back in time, because we can do all these things, and keep him from being bitten in the first place. In fact, wouldn't it be even better if we could keep that spider from even coming into that dimension? That the second that spider went into that dimension, some agent somewhere from Miguel's squad was sent in after it. So what if that agent was Gwen? And so Gwen, and or, because multiple things can be true. It could be both. It could be a Back to the Future moment. Because I was like, if the reason, the hair paradox, if the reason Gwen's hair is short because she met Miles, and she's from the future to come track, Terminator style, to come track down Miles in the first movie, then she would show up with short hair instead of long hair. But if it's like a whole like Back to the Future kind of thing, what if both happened? Of like, what if originally she was bamfed into that universe and had the hair and all the thing, and it got shorn, and the events happened, and then she went home. But then future her was like, we want you to go back, and is that Back to the Future 2 moment where Michael J. Fox is seeing Michael J. Fox, and so at some point maybe she's going in undercover, so maybe she wears a wig or something to I don't know. I can't square with that, but I thought it made perfect sense to me that somehow that Gwen Stacy is in that movie to stop the whole chain of events happening there too. Or in any case, I can't trust her as the narrator now, because a few things. When the very, very first interactions, you obviously, she's being fishy and she's being cagey and stuff, but it's just sort of like, is she being cagey because she just doesn't know what's going on and she's being freaked out? I think that she is fully aware, that Miles is Spider-Man. I think that she's more aware than we are led to believe that she's aware. Like, she knows more than Miles anyway, but, even more so. I just mean, because, like, when he touches her head and his hands get stuck to her, and you look at her facial expressions, she is not shocked or mortified or surprised. And again, why would she be? And I think we just go with it because she's a Spider-Man too. This is normal for her. Of course, this doesn't bother her, and she's like, oh, you're one of me, let's talk. But also, like, if she was there to intentionally, like if she was sent there, or maybe she wasn't sent from the future, or maybe she was sent, I don't know what she knows, but the point is, if she was sent to be like, I want you to go down to this Earth and I want you to collect the spider. And she tries to get to the spider, but she can't get to the spider before it bites Miles. So she fails once. And then she fails to capture Miles in the first movie. And then she fails a lot in her quest to like capture Miles, if that was the goal. But in the process, she kind of falls for him instead or whatnot. So, What if? I just was like, I think that would make a lot of sense, because she's not surprised at all when he gets stuck to her hair. And again, it's one of those moments of like, we're panicking because Miles is panicking because Miles doesn't know what's happening to him, and it's like he's going through puberty and he's nervous, and there's a girl he likes and he's freaking out. And what would it be like to be a teenager and to have Spidey sense, and like, you would be freaking out and everybody's looking at me, and so he's so focused on freaking out about how other people are thinking about him. If he had just calmed down, she'd be like, look, it's okay, dude, come over to this corner, let me explain to you what's going on with your body right now. Because she was fine with it. And then there were some other little hints and things too, and just cutaways from her character at key moments of like, okay, but what is she saying off camera? And then at the very end of the movie, it almost confirmed my theory too, because she says to Miles, I'm 15 months older than you. Like, wink, wink. So, like, I wonder if maybe there's multiple Gwens going on. Maybe the Gwen in the first part of the movie is the Gwen who didn't meet HQ. Because another thing, not only does the hair not support that, none of them have the watches. There's no watches in sight. Everybody's glitching, and you can see that. So maybe in the first part of the movie, that her story is genuine. She's telling the truth. But maybe later when we see her with the kind of more shaved haircut, maybe that is her from the future now. And she's like hiding that she has a watch or something. Because if she's from the future to begin with the whole time, and she's faking it, and she has a watch and everything, it would make her even more duplicitous, because that would mean that she's intentionally taking off her watch and hiding it and letting herself glitch to fool him, which would make her super more duplicitous and a totally different moral take on her character. So I don't know, maybe she is being genuine and telling the truth. I'll have to watch it again to be like, could I see a moment where, like, this might be a tale of two Gwens? So I think that is something that's going to come around. I am also really invested in the background characters of Aunt May and of the Prowler. And I mean the Prowler in broad strokes, as the Prowler is multiple people. A character analysis of the Prowler. We have to get a character analysis of the Prowler. That's essential. I think that is going to be core to the plot of Identity. Of, if but for the flip of a coin, if I had been born this way, or if the butterfly effect, if this one event had happened to my life instead of this event, or if this event instead of that event, if anything had happened one way or the other, I would have turned out a villain instead of a hero. And it's such a beautiful way to tell a superhero story, because in so many of these superhero stories, the villains are fighting a mirror image of themselves that's not literally themselves unless it's Vision. But it gets tired and hackneyed and stale. But it's also fun and campy, because you have you have Ant-Man versus Yellow Jacket in the first movie, and you have Iron Man versus other kinds of Iron Men, and you had the Scarlet Witch versus another witch, and you had a Black Panther versus another Black Panther, and so on. You get the point that key parts of telling the superhero story is you fighting someone that has equal powers to yourself, because it's kind of funny. So it'd be hilarious to see the real Taskmaster versus another Taskmaster. It was hilarious to see Captain America fight Captain America, for jokes, and so on and so forth. But there is real potential with Beyond for more character growth of exploring Miles Morales, because Miles Morales would be potentially fighting Miles Morales, and this idea of nature versus nurture versus how you define yourself and your identity, and the identity of the Prowler, and telling a very Prowler-focused story, and Miles Morales Spider-Man story. And I think that I have a feeling that there's more to meets the eye with every single character. At the very, very end of Into, and I would have to like freeze frame it or something, but at the very, very end of Into, as like Miles is like running out into like the street or whatever, off into like camera, like off in the like left and like this kind of area, like flashes you go by, I swear I saw what appeared to be like what might look like, I don't know, a 6 foot tall white male figure with blonde hair with a, what do you call it, baby Bjorn thing in the front with a baby in it, and I'm like, holy shit. Like in a blonde, as in the visage of like the Peter Parker that was killed in Miles Morales' universe, but maybe that's a variant of him holding a baby like from the future that is like implanted in that scene to like make sure that like all is going, like keeping an eye on Miles for good or ill or whatever reason, or I don't know, I'm just tripping, I'm just seeing into things, but you can see whatever you want to see. I saw strong parenting themes, and I'm gonna get to the parent thing too. I was just like trying to. There's just so much to think about. I just love. The more I think about it, the more it gives me to think, and I just love it. Like, these movies are absolutely phenomenal, and I think that the third one will be very stellar. But even if it's not, I'm very, very happy with these two movies. And just all of the work that they're doing about like identity, but just with colors and music and just visual effects and like 2001 references and like anyway. Okay, so where was I going with, well, I guess the only other thing I had with the transgender thing was like, it's about identity and about defining who you are and about transformation, and what better to tell that through than like the superhero type lens. And showing one face to the world and the other face to the world. And again, at the very end of the Into movie, it says, anyone can wear the mask. You can wear the mask. I hope you know that. So they were even saying back then, this isn't just about Peter Parker. This isn't just about Miles Morales. And it isn't just going to be about that. It's going to be about everybody. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say for that. I wanted to say that there's something going on totally with Aunt May. And I don't know if they'll get into it or not. But obviously, put yourself in her shoes. Something's going on with her. She knows what's up. And in Miles Morales' universe, that blonde Peter was more privileged. Peter B. Parker is poor. A lot of Peters are poor. But, like, the Tom Holland Peter, or, like, I should say Earth 9999999 Peter came into a lot of wealth. And the blonde Peter from Miles's universe also, was privileged because that lair, Lair, that Aunt May has, has all this stuff that boggles the mind. And so it's also kind of saying that you can be Spider-Man, whether you're male or female or any of the above, whether you're live action or cartoon. And Porky the Pig got a real dive in there, like, oh, what are you, some cartoon? Yeah, what of it? Don't you like animation? That was a nice little dig. And then, that anybody can, so it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, was another theme, like what is quintessential to this character. You don't even have to be funny, like they all, it's just a really interesting exploration in identity and variance and all kinds of stuff like that. Meandering, wandering thoughts. So what did I want to... What are the like little clues I saw with the May? So I really love that little line with Doc Ock of, my friends call me Liv, my enemies call me Doc Ock. And again, it's all a matter of perspective. Like, see what I was saying about the villains? Like, just rewatch the movie or anything and pretend that you're not the main character, and pretend that you are one of the background characters, and watch the whole thing from their perspective and what is their story to tell, because what's going on with Doc Ock? What's her story? You know, from her perspective, I don't know, like, obviously she's got a beef with blonde Spider-Man that is ill-explained, but I guess from her perspective in the movie Into, you know, some punks burst into her office, vandalize her office, attempt to steal her monitor and her tower, drop the monitor, vandalize the place, and then steal the tower. And she's chasing them down to get the tower back, and then when she gets the tower back, she leaves them alone. Except for the fact that, like, she punched first because she's got this ongoing, long-standing beef with blonde Spider-Man, and we don't know the story there. So again, she could be a sympathetic villain too, like the other Doc Ock definitely was. So what's her story? But she was just there Into to be a villain of the week. But she said, my friends call me Liv. And then later in the movie, when she comes in the room, Aunt May goes, Liv. She doesn't go Doc Ock. Now, why would Aunt May, who's the caretaker of Peter Parker, who's her beloved relative, was ostensibly killed with, like, you know, because of her maybe, or, you know, this is her son's, her nephew's nemesis. Why would she be friends with this woman? And we don't really think anything of it because, as apart from an aside, but there's probably a story there. And then later, Aunt May's like, I'm ready. You know, we don't question the guy in the chair or Q or whomever, because they're just serving the story as foils to the main character, but they all have stories. You know, Gwen has stories, May has stories, the villains have stories, they all have stories. And so yeah, anyway, you get the gist where I'm going, is that I feel like they're going to rip the Band-Aid off and be like, anybody can be a superhero, and really explore, you know, but for a twist of fate kind of thing. And you can define your own self, and you can define your own reality, and just this beautiful kind of interplay. So at an hour and a half in, I think that's all I wanted to say. I mean, I'm sure that there are endless things I want to say, but I think that was the main gist of what I wanted to say. Anyway, yeah, it was really, just really, really good storytelling and really good visually, and yeah, I'm sure I had a whole lot of other thoughts that just, but yeah, it's really clever, really, really creative, and really transformative.